Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time it is you're watching this, I hope everything's going well. And I hope that this presentation gives you a little bit of insight, a little bit of clarity into the research proposal. I hope it makes it easier to do the proposal and to do the research paper proper. Let's start with part one. What's the topic? This should be an easy two-sentence piece of the paper. What's the subject matter? Straight up. Who is the person that the paper's about? Please remember, you're not writing a biography. You're making an argument that this person deserves more recognition, or this person was misunderstood, or something like that. But who's the person, or what's the thing? I want to write about this. This topic is, you know, includes these two or three details. As you see on the photo on the slide, it's not just one thing. Usually it's broken down into a couple of subtopics. So include that as you go through and write this. But this should be one, two, three, four sentences tops. The hypothesis. There's this concept, there's this idea, there's this thought that you have. What do you hope to prove with this concept, with this idea, with this thought? And before you can get to the point of proving something, you probably should think about what do you know? You should probably also think, more importantly, what don't I know? And based on what don't I know, I'm going to hypothesize, but there's going to be research to test the hypothesis and see whether I am right or wrong. And I think the best thing to do to state your hypothesis is probably to have the tentative title. And that tentative title is 4 to 10 words. You're boiling everything down. But again, as part of the hypothesis, I hypothesize that. What is it that you are hoping to prove? What is it that you believe right now before you've done the research based on the knowledge you have at the moment? Next, importance. Why should a person care about this thing? What's at stake? Is it a big thing? Now, because we're dealing with code girls in World War II, if your argument is that the NSA should be abolished because of something or another, and you're linking that back to code girls and the basis of the coding operation became the NSA, that's fine. Why should your audience care? Remember, throughout this class, you're going to hear me say it almost every day, everything's an argument. Make the argument. Convince people, me in particular, since I'm the one who's going to have to approve this, that someone should care. Number 4, what's the link to Code Girls? I have this comic book cover on the top. The word girls is not enough. Even if the word girls is used, to denigrate the Archie's girlfriends, Betty and Veronica, even if the word girls was probably used to denigrate the women who broke codes, you have to go a step further. Look for multiple elements. The women who broke codes had to fight for equal rights. They weren't given equal rights. They weren't treated equally to the men. They were treated rather dismissively at first. This cover ties that together. Again, I can't write about one issue of a comic book, but look for multiple elements. Look for layers as you're making your connections. The word girls isn't enough. Look for multiple elements throughout to make the connection. I have some possible topics. The Inca Quipu was all about a code. Computer systems are all about codes. Video game cheat codes are all about codes. And are they somehow things that you would break, things that you need to go through and understand fully. What's the link to the codes that were in Code Girls? As you're writing your topic, as you're writing your proposal, make the link. Remember, the paper is not about the link. The paper is about these things, or could be about these things. Bletchley Park was the British version of what Code Girls did. As I said earlier in this presentation, the NSA sprang out of operations like the ones that broke the codes. None of the women were recognized for decades, and some of them, died unknown. Who are women scientists or inventors are unrecognized for their accomplishments. Women were segregated, lived in segregated sections of the complexes. World War II, there was segregation in the military. There's other sorts of segregation arguments you could make. The Spanish Civil War was a prelude to World War II. It was something that the United States should have seen coming. We didn't. It took us until Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor to get into World War II. There's all sorts of references to letters in Code Girls. Is there a history of letter writing? Is there a series of letters between two famous people that are important? Puzzles, the history of Sudoku or whatever. Codes were solved like puzzles. You can do anything as long as you can make the link. And let me prove the anything. The letters referenced in Code Girls are probably written with fountain pens because the ballpoint wasn't invented until the mid 1950s. So there is this ink called dark matter. It was reverse engineered from the Los Alamos laboratory, which developed nuclear bombs that were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this original ink had properties so that if documents were caught by someone and you suspected that it came from Los Alamos, and this was the only ink allowed on base at Los Alamos, the person would be caught. And since the Manhattan Project, the Los Alamos, and the code breaking projects were all secrets, you can write about secret ink. And you might have to go to invisible ink, you might have to go to other stuff, but you can write about secret ink if you can tie it together. And these sentences, with a little organization, would be enough to convince me to tie it together. The problem with my sample, and the thing that you have to work on, are the sources. Remember, you have to do things that have been in the last 5 years, which means published in 2018 or later. So, what sources are available? Are the sources academic? Any Google source is not going to be good enough. Are the sources academic? And what research strategies are you going to use to find the proper sources? And we'll have several presentations on that in the next few days. MLA citations. MLA citations require an author. They require a title. They require a title of containers. In other words, the source, where is it? Is it in a journal? Is it a book by itself? There could be multiple containers, and I'll show you that in the sample. Is there one author? Are there other contributors? For example, is it a work in translation? If it's a work in translation, those are other contributors. Is there a version? For example, if you're quoting the Bible, is it the authorized version? Is it the King James version? Is it the New International Version? Is it a Revised Standard Version? What are the numbers? Are there issue numbers? Things like that. Do we have a publisher? Do we have a publication date? And where, in the publication is it? Look at the color codes, the yellow, the green, the container, light blue, and so on. So, looking at this, I have the author. Notice its last name, first name, period. Notice there's quotation marks around the title of the article, which is the source. The title of the journal, which is italicized, is the container. And you will notice that there are two containers: the EBSCO host, the database where I found it, and the journal itself. Notice the numbers, notice the date, and then notice the location, the page numbers. And again, anytime you're using EBSCOhost or Academic Source Premier, you should have the extra URL involved. This is a sample. I'll try to have the word proposal fully typed when I show it in class. And we're just going to try to keep going from there. A couple other things. Who are the ideal readers? What will they know? What won't they know? What will they want to know? What do you have to do to please them? And again, think about the limits. You are writing a 5-page research paper. What are the limits to this research paper? Don't go in with trying to do too much or trying to do too little. Again, I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this gives you enough to think about as you go through the proposal. And we'll talk about the annotated bibliography. We'll talk about the research paper. And we're just going to move through Code Girls. And this will be probably the toughest part of the semester. So let's go through it and do the best we can with everything. If you have questions, please ask in class or shoot me an email. And I hope to see you in the next class period.